future that
dijital teknolojilerle
The love of God gripped me.
So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Hi, thank you for tuning in. This particular program, we are concluding our series on the ancient heresies of the early church. Old demons never die, they just come back in a different form. On this particular episode, we're going to be talking about Sabellianism, monarchianism, and modalism. They're all the same thing. And it's very interesting how they affected the early church and how they're still affecting us today. These things, they don't go away. They're just repackaged in a different form. And then here we are living in the midst of them again, 2,000 years later. It's so interesting, and this is a very interesting topic. And we're going to conclude with a sum up of everything that we've covered in these 5 programs and have a little surprise for you at the end. We're going to talk a little bit about revival. So God bless you, and thank you for tuning in. Hi there, thank you so much. This is Prophet Talk. We're so glad that you are here today. Today, we are focusing on the ancient heresies of the early church. This concludes this series of programs. This is our 5th program on this subject, and we're talking about one today called Sabellianism or modalism. And we will talk about that and explain it and how it affects the church today in our modern age. But we have with us today a very, very special guest. We have Torbjörn Aronsson, who is the head of the Scandinavian School of Theology. Torbjörn has 2 PhDs, one in political science, one in church history. This man knows church history because he has taught church history for many, many years. So it's a great, great privilege to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And just very quickly, the school is online.
That's right.
But they can also get a bachelor's program.
Absolutely. You can have a bachelor's program with Scandinavian School of Theology, and the courses, they are online. So when you're admitted to the school, you have log into the courses that are part of the program. And when you take a Bachelor of Arts in Theology, you are also part of open seminaries that are held 3 times per semester. So you meet other students who study theology and want to become pastors and missionaries. So we have both a practical side to it. Every student who study theology, they also are part of a church and are involved in church work, and they are a part of these open seminaries that we have 3 times per semester. So we try to combine both relationships and experiences of ministry gifts and practical work in the church with theological studies. And we want to train and equip coming generations of pastors and preachers in Scandinavia and the Nordic countries and other parts of the world. And all of our teachings are available in English. So if you know English or Swedish, you're welcome to apply to our school.
There's one other thing that the Scandinavian School of Theology has that I think is very, very valuable, and that is for every church. It's something called Bible Keys, which is for those who've never been to school or a Bible college. It's something that is specifically designed for you. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, that's right. The Bible Keys is 30 classes of basic Bible study, and this Bible study program was developed by our founder, Dr. Anders Gärdmar, who was also a professor of New Testament, and it's a very thorough but also very pedagogical basic Bible study program. So you have there is a website where you log in and where you have all these classes, So it's a self-study, Bible study course that is based on self-studies. And I think about 1 million people, in fact, have used the Bible keys up to this date. So it's very successful, and it's a very good program. So it doesn't cost anything really. We have a website, and it's free for people to log into and take part in. It's the so-called freeware on the internet.
Okay, so please forgive me for getting excited for a moment. Okay, so you're saying with the Bible Key program that close to 1 million people have viewed this program online, and that this self-study program, 30 hours or so, it's free. They don't have to pay anything for that.
That's right.
Of course, they have to pay for the seminary, for the School of Theology.
Absolutely.
But for this, this is designed and geared for every church.
That's right.
And I know of some churches that are actually beginning to use this and to take their people through it. So it isn't just one individual. They're actually using this on one particular night, maybe on a week for X number of weeks.
Exactly. So you can use it in local churches where you need a basic Bible course. For new members, for old members also, they need to have a basic foundation in scriptures. This is very good. And initially it was developed for Chinese Christians, but now we have it in 18 languages, in fact.
Wow, 18 languages.
That's right.
So perhaps for those who are listening, it might be in their language.
That's right.
So is it in Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, and Finnish?
I'm not sure if we have it in the Scandinavian languages yet, but the company that works with this is called MediaServe, and it's based in Uppsala. They are working with translating this into more languages, so the goal is to have it in all of these languages.
Tremendous. This is such a valuable tool, and it is so excellent. Thank you for sharing about this. So today, we have the pleasure of finishing this wonderful series and talking about an individual named Sabellius. Sabellius actually brought a teaching into the church that created great controversy and conflict in the church, and it's still creating a problem today in some ways in the modern church. It's a concept called modalism, and I'm wondering, Torbjörn, if you could tell us a little bit about Sabellius, a little bit about modalism, about how this developed back then and how it affects us today.
Well, Sabellius, we don't know really so much about. Sometimes this doctrine was also called monarchianism, and the thought is that God is one, and because God is one, then what the Bible says about God being Father, Son, and Holy Spirit must be interpreted as three ways God reveals himself. Not that God, in fact, is three persons that are one at the same time. And so this was a way of reconciling what the Bible says about God with some Greek philosophical thoughts, Platonism and Aristotelianism, where the belief was that there was one God who had put everything in motion, and he could not be divided into three. He must be one compartment, so to speak. So it was really a conflict with Greek philosophy that was at the bottom, and it led to endless speculations about how we are to describe the triune God that we find in the Bible.
So the issue is actually a Trinity issue.
That's right.
And Sabellius believed that there was one God.
Yeah.
But that one God had three different manifestations.
Yeah.
And Orthodox normal Christianity believe that there is three but one.
Yeah.
God is one, but he is three.
Yeah.
And that's part of the mystery of Trinity.
Exactly.
And that in Trinity that Father, Son, and Spirit are made of the same substance.
Yeah.
and they are co-equal.
Yeah.
But yet there is Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah.
And this is one of the mysteries of Trinity.
Yeah.
And Sabellius tried to resolve this issue by creating this theology of monarchianism, which was basically that you have one God in three different manifestations. But it's essentially God showing himself as this, God showing himself as that. And it's not the three in one, it's just one.
That's right. It's a way of, it has to do with this Greek philosophy that was so very influential in the ancient world, where there were rationalist tendencies, and people tried to reconcile then a Greek philosophical logic with biblical revelation, and you cannot, it is not possible to integrate them. Biblical revelation is something different. And one very important thing here is that our human intellect is limited. We cannot understand God as he actually is. We can only know about God as much as he has revealed to us. So we must accept that we cannot fully describe the glory of God, God's nature fully. We can only talk about God as he has revealed himself to us in the Scripture. And in Scripture, God reveals himself as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And as not just as three manifestations, but as three persons.
Fantastic. So how did this affect the early church? What were they wrestling with?
Well, you can say the early church wrestled with the influence of Greek philosophy. Sometimes also, as we have said, with Greek mystery religions. The ancient world as a whole was polytheistic. There were many, many gods everywhere, and each town had their own god, and then there were, so many different cults that existed parallel to the Christian church. But there were also philosophies that were rationalist, and they wanted to, explain everything out of a kind of logical thinking. In the Bible, we have a revelation of God, and it's a revelation that we either have to accept or reject. If we go in and try to integrate biblical revelation with logic and philosophy that has a different source and background, it will create all kinds of strange effects, and the biblical revelation, of course, will be distorted. And the Christians in that day, they, of course, wanted to defend the biblical testimony, the apostolic tradition, what the apostles had brought to the church, their writings about Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God, and how God had worked through Christ. You could say by defending the Bible, you defend the mystery. The Bible doesn't say everything, but it says enough for us to understand God and receive Him and receive His salvation. But it did not answer all of our questions. So there is a mystery. So the Bible guards, the mystery, you could say.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So this Trinitarian conflict is seen in 325 in Nicaea, when they're dealing with Gnosticism and Arianism. And in a way, they're also dealing with this Trinitarian controversy about Him.
Yeah.
And so it's an issue that was everywhere. It wasn't just in the Western Church, it was also in the Eastern Church. And Arianism was essentially an Eastern issue that had to do with Antioch and with Alexandria.
Yeah.
And Gnosticism was Greek. And Sabellius, where in the world did he come from? Do we know even where he came from?
No, I don't think we know really where he comes from. I think that monarchianism was really the original term for this belief, but then it is also called Sabellianism by some church fathers because there was a guy called Sabellius who held these doctrines. But the content of the doctrine that is what we describe here, that God is one, and because He is one, He cannot be three, but he changes his mood, so to speak, his way of revelation. He is revealing Himself as the Father, and then as the Son, and then as the Spirit. And it has different strange effects, you can say.
Has there been this teaching? It's also called oneness in the modern terminology.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Has this teaching about oneness, Trinity being one, has that been seen throughout church history? Has there been other movements?
It erupted once in a while, you could say. Whenever Greek philosophy has come on the scene, where both Plato and Aristotle, they developed logic. They had a certain logical way of thinking. They had a high regard for human reason, the human intellect. They did not have a biblical view of man. They thought that human reason did not have much limitations, that human intellect was more or less divine, and that you could develop it very, very far. Their emphasis on human capacity to understand and their way of thinking, their logic, when that was brought on the scene, when Greek philosophy became popular in the church or in society in general, then it clashed with biblical revelation. Then people began to question the Trinitarian character of God, and that this oneness thinking comes on the scene.
Fascinating. So whenever there has been Greek philosophy that has appeared, you see these issues that have to deal with Trinity.
Yeah.
Okay. Now forgive me for saying this, and help me if I'm missing the point here a little bit. But we've seen this with the concept of deism.
Yeah, exactly.
And can you explain that?
Yeah, you could say from the 17th century and onwards, we have philosophical movements in the West, which are partly influenced by Platonism. So the old Greek philosopher Plato, who lived 5 centuries before Christ, in the 17th century, his philosophy was revived. It had been revived in the earlier century also, but there are philosophers and theologians that bring up his thinking, and especially his emphasis that there is one God that is behind everything. If the one is not, then nothing is. So they defended the existence of God, but they also were Platonists in the sense that they did not accept, miracles. They did not accept the Trinity, the Incarnation, the miracles really of the Bible. They also tended to question prophecy. So you could say they wanted to have a religion without biblical revelation. And in the 18th century, when skepticism is growing, there is a new breakthrough of natural sciences, deism became popular. It was a way for people who began becoming secular. It's also a way for them to distance themselves from Christianity without being atheists. They could say, we have a faith in God, but we are not superstitious, and our way of thinking about God is reconcilable with science.
So when we talk about deism,
Yeah.
what are the tenets of deism? What did they believe? Because we're talking about a lot of scientists here.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. They believe that God had created the world. The natural laws were put in motion by God. But after God had created everything and put everything in motion, he did not intervene. So he was, the clockmaker, a clockworker that did not intervene in the clock. When he put it in motion, he did not try to intervene in it. So the world was seen as a mechanism following natural laws that God had put in place. But there were no place really for what the Bible teaches about God in this worldview of the days, like incarnation. Sin was something that they thought was just lack of knowledge. Redemption was not really needed. Man would be rewarded for if he lived a moral life or not. Basically, to be a Christian, that was to live a moral life and do your duty, you could say. So the core of biblical revelation was discarded by the days.
Well, it seems as though that from the 1700s onward, you have a rapid advance of science.
That's right.
A rapid advance of modern culture as we know it.
Yeah.
And the underpinning of all of this is the Aristotelian and Platonic teachings in some ways that came from the Greek philosophies that influenced Christianity.
Yeah, okay.
And so deism actually, because God is distant, it's given rise to other philosophies that we're wrestling with even today, such as humanism in particular. And so all of this has a root that goes way back to what we're talking about in this particular program. And the modern form of monarchianism, what is that?
Well, that Trinitarian faith in God has been, so solidly grounded in the historic churches that, in general, it has not been questioned. You could say that in the Protestant tradition, the Holy Spirit role has been quite de-emphasized. But belief in God's Trinity as Father, Son, and Spirit, it hasn't been questioned very much. But when we come into the 20th century, we have a new revival, a Pentecostal revival, that saw itself as the last revival before the return of Christ, a unique revival different from all others. That meant the restoration of apostolic Christianity. Then suddenly this Trinitarian issue came up again, and it's quite fascinating story that it was at a Pentecostal camp meeting in California in 1913, where a Canadian preacher with the name of McAllister, he preached a sermon about how the baptismal formula, and he said that we should baptize people in Jesus' name, not in the name of the Father and the Son and the Spirit, because when you read Acts of the Apostles, you can see that they baptize people in Jesus' name. And that sermon was, of course, a sermon, taken out of the blue, you could say. It was amateur theology. After that sermon had been preached, another guy who listened to him at this camp meeting, he meditated over the name of Jesus during the rest of the day and night, and then eventually he came out and said that I have a new revelation, and that is that Jesus is the name of God, and of course we should baptize everybody in Jesus' name. And then out of this came a revival of this modalistic understanding of God.
So, okay, let's focus on that revival history for a minute, because there are many Pentecostals listening to this program.
Yeah.
we're grateful that you are all listening here, no matter what stream of Christianity that you're a part of. But I am from the United States, and in my years of being a new Christian, I ran into both the people who believed in modalism and then those who didn't. And what was interesting is that you see this great divide even going on into the 1920s in the Assemblies of God. And could you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I think that if you look at classical Pentecostalism, the old Pentecostal churches in the United States, you have one branch of that comes from Wesleyan Methodism. And they were anchored, more in the Wesleyan Methodism came from the Anglican tradition originally. They had a stable theology. They had confessions of faith. They had the Apostolic Creed and the Nicene Creed and everything as a foundation. And they never ran into any questions around the Trinity of God. But the Baptist stream of early Pentecostalism, they saw creeds and confessions really as a hindrance to Christian unity. It was something that only created divisions. So they said we will not have any creeds. We will not have any confessions of faith. And we are on top of that. We are, the new revival movement. We are an apostolic revival movement because we have gifts of the Spirit in operation. So we don't need really any old ancient creeds or confessions of faith. So it was a kind of ahistorical approach, and I would say also a lot of pride. And that was a background to this issue.
Okay, so you're saying that the early Baptists moved in gifts, and spoke in tongues.
I say the Pentecostal branch that grew out of baptism, the Assemblies of God, they had roots. One of the roots were in Pentecostal revival among Baptists. And it was similar in Sweden. We also had the Pentecostal revival. It grew out of the Baptist church or Baptist denomination. And among Baptists, there existed this way of thinking, and it was strengthened by the revival.
I think it's fascinating to study Pentecostal history in particular, and I know that during the 1920s there was a break.
Yeah.
There was a division between those who were Trinitarian and non-Trinitarian.
Yeah.
And it was really an issue that actually tore that movement apart in the 1920s, and they were at factions and almost at war with each other for some decades. Can you mention anything about this?
Absolutely. The Assemblies of God was started in the late 1910s. I think the initial meeting was 1914, so it was 1 year after this camp meeting, and when the oneness movement began. But quite early on, the Assemblies of God understood that we cannot have both Trinitarians and non-Trinitarians in our movement, and we must settle this issue. So they had to compose a confession of faith that all their ministers had to sign. And if they didn't sign it, they were not allowed to be part of the Assemblies of God. And as a result of that, this part of the Pentecostal revival was split, and you had several oneness Pentecostal denominations being created. So they have a common origin, but they split. And the Assemblies of God, they have this background with a thinking that we are a unique movement. We don't need any creeds, but eventually they understood and they had to face the situation where they in fact had to define their faith in response to the challenge from oneness.
So you see in early Pentecostalism in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, you see several divisions, several different streams developing.
That's right.
You see the Church of God, Church of God Holiness, Church of God Prophecy, and some of those were Trinitarian, some of them were non-Trinitarian. You see the church, the Oneness Church, the United Pentecostals, which are non-Trinitarian. But then you also see Church of God in Christ, the Kojic churches, that were split from the Assemblies of God churches. And they are equal in size in many ways to what the Assemblies of God churches are.
Yeah, I think the Church of God is just very tricky, this early history.
Yes, it is.
And as I remember it, I think the Church of God in Christ was the oldest Pentecostal denomination. It was a holiness denomination, and that embraced the Pentecostal revival. And they were quite liberal or generous in handing out licenses to preachers. So many of those that eventually became Assemblies of God ministers, they had begun within the Church of God in Christ. And gradually there were racial splits also, making Church of God in Christ a mainly black Pentecostal church, and Assemblies of God a mainly white Pentecostal denomination. Fascinating. And you have also the Church of God was a third branch, which had a Wesleyan background, or Quaker Wesleyan background, and there were splits. So you had the Church of God of Prophecy out of that.
So you see all of these things happening, and in the midst of this, the modalistic, monarchical error is right in the middle of this thing. Right. It's the issue that was a catalyst for all of this was actually a Trinitarian issue. And then out of that, there was factionalism that came through other different things, of course. But this was the main catalyst. This was, as we say, the main bomb.
That's right.
That affected everything. And in some ways, it's still affecting the church today. And that we have modern United Pentecostals. And they're larger streams than what most people realize. You say anything about that?
This oneness stream, there have been a couple of American denominations, Pentecostal denominations that became oneness, and then also in China there is an old Pentecostal denomination that is now quite huge, that is called the True Jesus Church, and they're also oneness. So the oneness doctrine has spread into other continents also. It has been quite isolated from the rest of Pentecostalism and Christianity because of their doctrine on the Trinity. But there have been, on the personal level and grassroots level, quite a lot of contacts, and there are several preachers that have been very influential in the mainstream, you could say, Pentecostal charismatic world that have a oneness background. So it means that the oneness Pentecostals, that they on one side they are isolated, but on the other side there are interactions going on, and this issue still exists. I have met students which had a oneness background, and also pastors that have come to the pastors' educations where I have been teaching. So I have met this, and it is still an issue.
It's very much an issue, and we won't mention any names, but there are significant church leaders in the world today that embrace this Trinitarian issue. And I was actually quite surprised that some of them embrace this issue. And yet they're charismatic. They move in gifts. They do everything that the normal Pentecostals do, with worship, and a lot of their preaching is very similar. But the concept of Trinity and the root of what they're doing is completely different. And so it finds itself in the modern church. How does this affect us today is the bigger question.
I think that what is led to among the oneness is, pride and sectarianism. That if you listen to some of their songs, you can hear it in sermons also, that they see themselves as, the church. They are the only ones, more or less, and they are the only ones that are true to the apostolic Christianity, and they pride themselves. So this doctrine has led to a sectarianism, splits, and pride, I would say. So when it comes in contact with other church bodies, it leads to splits. It leads to divisions over something that is really above our human capacity to understand. We have to accept the biblical revelation and stop from trying to figure out exactly how the Father and the Son are related to each other. We have to accept what the Bible says about it without trying to rationalizing it.
The confusion for many people is that the worship can be very much the same music, the same songs.
Yeah, exactly.
The Holy Spirit, the presence of God, seems to be there in some ways, but there's an emphasis that is completely different.
Yeah.
And so people will say, well, then what's the big problem? What's the big problem between Trinitarian and non-Trinitarian?
Yeah.
And if you are a non-Trinitarian, then your concept of salvation is different than your concept when you are the opposite of this.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. The one side of it is that you have, as in a lot of Western Christianity, a very strong focus on the Son, on Jesus. But you tend to de-emphasize the role of the Father and the role of the Spirit. That is one consequence of that. And if you de-emphasize the role of the Father, you will de-emphasize the role of God, the Creator of heaven and earth. The understanding of the relationship between what Jesus did on the cross and creation, God's creation and God's upholding of it, the final consummation of salvation. That is something that is really being confused, and you get a one-sidedness then. The relationship between salvation and creation is either not touched upon or it becomes very blurred. So within the Holy Spirit, it tends also to be de-emphasized, the role of the Spirit as a person. It tends to become just a power or something that you can dispose of. Yeah.
Well, if in non-Trinitarian, if Jesus is the God, then the Spirit is just a manifestation of Him.
Yeah.
And if Jesus is the God, then the Father is just a name of who he is. Okay. And so while that doesn't sound harmless, it is. It's very, very. It really presents a lot of problems because it doesn't deal with the role of the Holy Spirit adequately. It doesn't deal with the role of the Father. And in some ways, it even minimizes the divinity of Christ and the substitutional role of atonement that He did.
Yeah. Exactly what happened on the cross. The death of Christ was the death of God. It was the death of God the Son. The Father was in the Son, where the Son suffered and died, and then the Spirit was present in the resurrection. And both of these two sides of redemption get lost.
Beautiful. This is absolutely brilliant. This has been eloquently communicated. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people here in summing all of this up?
I think that we need to see that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, they are equal, that they are God, and that means that we can worship the Father, we can worship the Son, we can worship the Spirit, because we are worshiping God. And we baptize people in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, because that they are equal. If the Holy Spirit hadn't been God, we could not have baptized people in the name of the Holy Spirit or the name of the Father. So the Trinitarian formula when we baptize, the background of that is that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We can have a relationship to the Father, we can have a relationship to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit also. We can be led by the Spirit today. So there is a personal relationship that grows out of the understanding of that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Fantastic. This has been absolutely brilliant. We thank you so much for this series. I want to thank you for being with us. We will have you back to talk about revival history in the future. Thank you so much for listening. We just want to bless you and we want to pray for you. God, for everyone that is listening to this program right now, let the word of truth, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, come into their lives, and may the word come real to them. May the Bible become more real to them than what they ever have. May the Spirit lead them in every way. May the Father reveal Jesus to them. And Jesus, thank you so much for everything that you've done for us. God bless you all. We'll see you again soon on another Prophet Talk.
Tusen takk for at du ser på Profetprat. Og hvis du vil hjelpe oss med å produsere flere programmer, så er vi veldig takknemlige for en stor eller liten gave, og du kan gi på Vipps eller det kontonummeret du ser på skjermen.
You know, there are costs that are associated with this. Would you please help us?
Du vet, det kostnader som for å få gjort dette her, og vi vil være så snill å hjelpe oss.
We would be very, very grateful for that.
Det vil vi være veldig takknemlige for.
Thank you so much for that.
Tusen takk for at du hjelper oss.